from a popular fan favorite to some dire box office concerns. This is why the DCU needs to reboot The Flash with Wally West. The Flash is DC's latest entry into their struggling cinematic universe. And despite some pretty positive review scores, the movie has struggled to make much of a dent at the box office. Despite its $200 million budget and the return of Michael Keaton's Batman, the movie has barely managed to make its money back. It was only after a month in theaters that The Flash was able to limp across the finish line.
I might be able to do it. I might be able to jumpstart it out.
Let's be real here. The DCEU really has been on the back foot from the start. It was clear from the beginning that Warner Brothers were trying to mimic the success of Marvel, but it was also rushed and not thought out. Disney has had the benefit of Kevin Feige and his creative vision leading the charge for over 15 years now, whereas it really felt that DC was just slapping it all together and making it up as they went along. Seeing as James Gunn has now been appointed the creative head of DC's cinematic universe going forward, it may feel as though that may change. There has already been a lot of coverage on the stories of various actors playing Justice League staples not returning in the new Gunn-led project. Henry Cavill as Superman and Ben Affleck as Batman have already been confirmed to have hung up the cape. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman is also in doubt, as is Jason Momoa as Aquaman, despite the King of Atlantis' sequel film still being slated to release in 2023. Many people believe that the Flash film would serve as a good opportunity for DC to hit the reset button on the series. As one of the character's most iconic storylines, the Flashpoint Paradox did exactly that in the comics. Now, the plot of the film is definitely an adaptation of Flashpoint, and it does serve that purpose of explaining the changes to the cinematic universe's continuity. But the problem is that Ezra Miller is still sticking around as Barry Allen. At least that's what the word on Hollywood Boulevard is anyway. Considering all the changes that have been happening behind the scenes at Warner Brothers, many fans felt that perhaps the Scarlet Speedster should get a revamp as well, namely in the form of Wally West. Now there have been several heroes who have carried on the Flash mantle over the years. The first was Jay Garrick, who first appeared in 1940. Barry Allen was reintroduced as The Flash in 1956, which gave the character his iconic look and backstory, a scientist who was splashed with chemicals that had been struck by lightning, which gave him the ability to run at superhuman speeds. A few years later, in 1959, the writers introduced Barry's young nephew, Wally West. When Wally found out that his uncle was the Flash, he decided to purposefully replicate the accident that gave his uncle superpowers in order to become his sidekick. The experiment worked and Wally became the first Kid Flash. Not the most original name, but hey, when your entire motivation is patterning yourself on your uncle, I guess that makes sense. Wally served as his uncle's sidekick for many years, but also had his own side adventures as a founding member of the Teen Titans. However, when Barry died in the seminal storyline crisis on Infinite Earths, the new revamped DC was left without a Scarlet Speedster, and Wally decided to take up the mantle to honor his uncle. From there, Wally served as the comic's one and only Flash for over 20 years, until Barry Allen returned in 2009's The Flash Rebirth. But during his tenure as The Flash, Wally proved himself to be incredibly popular with the fan base, and has continued to serve as The Flash even after Barry's return. Wally is way more lighthearted and humorous than Barry is typically portrayed, which seemed to ingratiate him much more with fans. It's worth noting, though, that many hardcore Flash fans felt that Ezra's Barry Allen acted way more like Wally West, being the quippy sort of comic relief member of the Justice League. This was honestly really confusing for a lot of fans, because it kind of ended up pleasing nobody. Wally's story was a bit more compelling, as his narrative involved him having to live up to the legacy left by his mentor. It's a story that forced Wally to grow up out of his more childlike worldview, but still keep that wittiness that could keep him fun. Having Barry being the one to crack the jokes doesn't really fit with his backstory about his feelings over his mother's murder and his father's incarceration. But here is where having Wally fit into the new timeline might be tricky, seeing as we've now seen a Flash who is quick to crack wise. It means that to have Wally behave similarly might make it look like they are just repeating the characterization they did with Barry. Honestly, I don't really understand why they didn't just use Wally West's Flash in the first place. It's clearly what they wanted for the character. Wally's popularity is so strong that he is consistently chosen to star as whichever version of the Flash is needed for the particular property. Wally's Flash was the one who starred in the iconic Justice League cartoon that ran on Cartoon Network from 2001 to 2006. However, when the time came for DC to focus on their their younger superheroes in Young Justice, Wally appeared as Kid Flash instead. Wally West is arguably the most popular Flash and would be a perfect fit for the new Gunn-led universe.
Oh, man! I knew we'd be the last ones here.
Especially considering how poorly Ezra Miller's Flash has been received. Ezra Miller has, of course, been embroiled in numerous issues in their personal life, with their off-screen life having been marred with multiple controversies and legal issues. Since 2022, they have been accused of committing assault, burglary, disorderly conduct, harassment, and grooming of minors, resulting in multiple widely publicized arrests, citations, and restraining orders. Yikes. They seem like the sort of guy that would end up getting busted by the Flash, not playing him. Miller has recently apologized for their actions and has said that they are taking the time in order to work on themselves and their mental well-being. But you'd think that with all of these controversies, Warner Bros. Would take the opportunity to recast them. I mean, it's clear from the box office returns that fans don't really seem that interested in Ezra's Flash, and maybe Gunn would be better placed to just ditch Barry and move to Wally West. Director of The Flash, Andy Muschietti, has said that they have stood by their support of Miller. Andy has gone on a record saying that if he were involved in a Flash sequel, he would have Ezra return, as he believes that no one else could play Barry Allen quite the same way. Maybe that's a good reason for them to pass the baton on to Wally West. James Gunn himself has implied that Miller might be sticking around as the Flash, potentially being the only returning OG leaguer. It seems like an interesting choice, but only time will tell if Gunn decides to stick to it. Fundamentally, the studio will go with what will be best for their bottom line. Following the financial flop of Black Adam, it seems like Warner Brothers were happy to ditch plans on exploring The Rock's character much further, which makes it even more concerning that The Flash actually did worse than Black Adam at the box office. Yep, you heard that right. Black Adam at least managed to pull in nearly $400 million off a $200 million budget, whereas The Flash has only just recently recouped its losses off the $200 million it cost to make. And despite the fact that The Flash has technically made back its budget because it has fallen so short of its projected earnings, it is currently being considered one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. I mean, DC has always struggled to compete with Marvel at both the box office and with critics, but it really says something when even the pull of Michael Keaton's Batman isn't enough to beat out Guardians 3 and Spider-Man. Moving to Wally West might really be what's best for the new DC continuity moving forward, as it would give a chance to properly establish a new tone and character for The Flash. Hopefully Gunn will take the hint and decide to leave Barry Allen in the past so we can move on to greener pastures with Wally West in the future. So there you have it. From a popular fan favorite to some dire box office concerns, that is why the DCU needs to reboot The Flash with Wally West.